In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a 1440p gaming PC build that's not going to break the bank, centered around a stunning all-white colour scheme, featuring some of my favourite components that strike a perfect balance between aesthetics, performance, and pricing. This is a system that should stack up really well at 1440p in some of the latest AAA titles. As always, I'll be walking you guys through the whole build process from start to finish, talking about the parts I chose and why, including some alternatives if you want to know what your other options look like, and working through our full gaming benchmark suite a little bit later. Let's do this. The Valkyrie V240 and V360 are here, with high-speed pumps for high thermal efficiency, S12 fans which are optimized for radiators, and a 5-year warranty. The V-Series is stacked with features. A 3.5-inch LCD screen sits front and center, letting you show off key performance metrics at a quick glance, with an epic unboxing experience, great performance, and unique visual design, which round off an awesome package. Learn more at the first links in the description below. I'm going to start today by talking through the CPU and GPU combo first of all. Now for the CPU today, I've gone for the AMD Ryzen 5 9600 Non-X. Now this is a CPU AMD really didn't have much fanfare about when it first landed, and it's basically a cheaper version of the Ryzen 5 9600 X. The lower the resolution you game at, the more likely you are to have a CPU bottleneck. And 1440p with the GPU I've gone for in this build means going slightly cheaper on the CPU is going to be fine. Heck, if you wanted to trim even more budget out of this build, you could go for the last generation Ryzen 5 7600, which I've frequently seen for well below $200. Latest pricing and availability will be, of course, at the links in the description below. Now, as far as GPUs go, I've paired the 9600 up with the RTX 5070, and here's a few reasons why. Now, in the current GPU landscape, there are not that many options in and around this price point. Yes, AMD did launch the RX 9070 Non-XT, but availability for that's kind of difficult, and you're honestly better spending the extra money on the XT variant. The 5070 then hasn't got too much competition. This particular model comes in from ASUS, it's their Prime card, and Prime for ASUS is all about offering up value for money and giving you a cooler that's a little more basic, but still does a good job at keeping GPU temperatures nice and low. This card's got 12GB of video memory, which is enough for the build today at 1440p. Anything less and we'd be having big problems, though it does notably have 4GB less VRAM than the cheaper 5060 Ti and 9060 XT. What gives? Now, to be honest, those cards don't need 16GB of VRAM, and the only reason they have it is because the memory bus that's used in the memory modules mean they can't put 12GB on that card. Otherwise, they probably would have. That makes the 12GB of GDDR7 memory on the 5070 fine for now. 4K gaming is going to be a little more limited, but this is a 1440p build, and for me, that's not a major problem. Now, sticking with the white colour scheme, I've actually opted to match the white graphics card today with this beautiful white motherboard from GeekaWhat. This is the B850 Aorus Elite Wi-Fi 7 ICE, and it's one of my favourite B850 boards on the market, full stop. We actually use this in loads of Geeka PC systems, which is our UK pre-building company. I'll put that down below, and we are planning on offering this exact system for sale on Geeka PC, so you can check that out if you wish. Now, there's loads of reasons that I like this board so much, but the main one for a white build is that it's the best colour scheme match I can find. Not only does it have stunning white heatsinks and heat spreaders, but it's got white RAM DIMMs, white CPU mounting hardware, a white socket cover, and even a white PCB. The rear I/O on the back is also pretty good, with a nice selection of USB Type-A's. You've got a USB Type-C here, your Wi-Fi 7 support, even optical audio, and a 2.5GB Ethernet connector. It's a standard ATX board too, meaning it's going to fit inside of any standard ATX case, and it sits on the new B850 chipset. That's going to give you widespread PCI Gen 5 support for things like Gen 5 graphics cards, of which the RTX 5070 is one, and the new Gen 5 NVMe's. So you've got all those options on this board should you so need them. It's also really nice and easy to build with, and has loads of cool little toolless additions, like this toolless M.2 heatsink, that below you've got your 3 slots, of which 2 are Gen 4 and the third is Gen 5. It's a really nice board, it feels very well made, and as I say, we've used this board loads and never had any problems. For the RAM or memory in the build today, I've gone for this T-Force Delta kit from Teamgroup. This is one of my favourite white kits of memory, It's got a bit of an angular design, it's got a nice heat spreader at the top that provides a little bit of differentiation, and to be honest with you can't go too far wrong. Crucially, this kit is a 32GB kit with a 6000 megahertz or mega transfer speed and a CL of 30. 30 is what you want because the lower the latency, the better the performance, and high latency can really get in the way of frame rate. Now, as far as the storage is concerned, I've gone for the Crucial P3+. This particular model is just the 1TB drive, but you can step up to a 2 or a 4TB if you wish. Just watch though, because at 4TB there are cheaper drives than this. Something like the Lexar NQ790 is a great shout. It all depends on what storage you've got in your current build, if you have a current build, and what you need in this system. Something to think about, and obviously the reason I've stuck with the 1TB is to keep this build in budget. Now, I'm going to be installing the M.2 drive into one of the M.2 slots under this heatsink. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the very top slot here is actually PCI Gen 5. Now, that means if you go for a Gen 5 drive in the future, this is Gen 4, you might want that slot available. As such, I'm going to leave it blank because it doesn't really matter which slot we use, at least not for this drive. Now, I'm actually going to use the bottom slot here, which has got the nice little M.2 armor on it, slide the drive into place, pull back the little toolless mechanism, he says. There we go, it was just being a little bit impatient. And make sure to remove the appropriate plastic cover on the thermal pad that's located above the drive slot that you use. Once that's been done, you can then slide this back into place, clip it over the little notch, and the M.2 drive is all good to go. I'm going to do the CPU next as well. Obviously already talked about the Ryzen 5 9600 a little earlier, but if I open up the box, you will actually see this does come included with a stock cooler. Now, if you're really strapped for cash, you can use this. And with a relatively low power 65-watt TDP CPU, like the 9600, it can be beneficial. But honestly, I wouldn't. The reason is because the size of the cooler is just not enough to give you really effective heat dissipation at low audible noise levels. And looking at the cooler I've gone for in today's build, which comes from a new brand called upHere, never heard of them before, just saw it on Amazon and thought, yep, I'll pick one of those up. You can see the size difference is enormous, and the cooling capacity that you're going to get between these two models is just vastly different. The cooler I've gone for here is from upHere, as I said earlier. It's got this really nice white powder-coated heatsink. You can see nice easy mounting mechanism with just 2 screws that are going to clip onto some brackets later. You've got 4 heat pipes that go all the way through, obviously the heatsink, and then through the cold plate on the bottom of the CPU, and a 120mm fan that's ARGB, so it'll sync up to everything else in the build today, and it just looks really rather nice. It's available with or without this little RGB divot on the top. This doesn't look very RGB. You can buy it in 2 derivatives. I guess we will find out later. I was meant to be installing the CPU though before I got sidetracked talking about coolers, and there is nothing better than a box fresh Ryzen processor. Look at that bad boy. And what we're going to do, like normal, is just line up the triangles on the processor with the triangle on the CPU socket, drop the chip into place, not literally, be careful, and then secure the arm down with a bit of pressure to get the CPU nicely seated into place. Now, the final thing then to do on the motherboard is a bit of CPU cooler prep, and this can be easily done by finding your CPU cooler's manual and navigating to the portion of the manual that describes the AMD AM5 installation process, which is probably actually the same as what you'll find on AM4. Now then, AMD. So actually fairly clear, we need to remove the stock AMD mounting brackets and then just add on the specialist upHere brackets. So you can see there's some spacers, some silver brackets, and some screws. I have actually installed this cooler before, so I have a good idea of what we need to do, and all of the bags and stuff with the hardware you need are nicely labelled too. That's actually really amazing to see. So there you can see we've got these silver brackets that are required, the spacers just to this side, and then these screws at the top. So remove the AMD brackets, add the spacers on, add the silver brackets on, and screw everything into place. I'm then going to add a small dab of thermal paste. This comes included with the cooler. You definitely don't want to use the whole tube. Sort of a large grain of rice tends to be what they say. A little something like so. And then the cooler, providing you've removed the little film that comes to protect the copper contact points, should go on nice and easily. And we want the fan, of course, to be facing this way where the RAM DIMMs are. That's to ensure we can pull fresh air through the cooler to exhaust out the back of our Phanteks XT-View case. Get these tightened sort of by hand to begin with, but you definitely want to torque them tight with a screwdriver. Make sure you do each screw bit by bit. You don't want to screw one fully down and then the other fully down, as each time you do this, you put in unnecessary pressure on the actual CPU and the heat spreader on top of the CPU. So bit by bit until the cooler is nice and tight, all the way to the bottom until you can't screw anymore. And then the completed motherboard assembly is finished. And look at that. The RAM looks really nice. The cooler really good. Oh, it's really, really star starting to come together. Now that your motherboard is ready to go, I'm going to take the panel off the case, and I've realised I haven't actually spoke about what this is. This is the Phanteks XT View. Now this is one of my favourite PC cases when you're looking at a fish tank style chassis that's built well and doesn't cost the earth. Now it's a standard ATX form factor with a nice clear tempered glass panel. You get 3 fans included as standard, 1 in exhaust at the rear, and then weirdly, and I have raised this with Phanteks and they said they fixed it in the newer kind of batches that are at retailers now, these fans are actually the wrong way around. They're both facing in exhaust when it should be facing in intake, so I will swap those around in a moment's time. It will also neaten up these cables. It comes with a built-in ARGB controller, good clearance for graphics cards, ventilation on the top and to the side of the power supply, so you can go for any PSU orientation. And if I take off this rear panel, you can see a little more clearly that all of the front panel cables that come included are actually white, and the whole thing is going to colour match really rather nicely. Now at the back of the case, there is indeed a little accessory box that's harboured inside this hopefully toollessly removable hard drive cage. So in theory, and the cage comes out, and then inside of the cage, as I say, you get the accessory box. It's a bit snug, but it pops out nice and easily, and inside of here are all of the screws you need for the build, some cable ties, and a manual as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and lay the case down flat for the motherboard assembly. Locate the 9 included screw holes. So we've got 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom. These standoffs are all in the right places, and that's going to allow me to simply slide the motherboard into place. The I/O popping through, of course, the rear I/O, and the motherboard sitting in nice and easily. Again, the colour scheme already looks amazing, and once I've screwed the motherboard down, the whole thing should be nice and secure to move about. I'm also going to take a moment to correct the fans before the graphics card goes in. Once that's in, that's going to be in the way, so I'm going to flip the fans around now, rewire them up, and get them into the correct intake orientation. With the motherboard in there and the fans now resolved, I am going to do a little bit of cabling and wiring. Just run through all the front panel cables, including the HD audio, both of the USB 3 Type A, and then latterly Type C connections, as well as the front panel, the JFP one, which goes down to the bottom right. I'm then going to go ahead and do the GPU. Normally I'd say do the power supply while it's easier to get at, but this case keeps access to lots of our power connectors pretty easily. We've got no liquid cooler in the way. The whole thing's pretty spacious, and as such, we should be good to install our Prime RTX 5070. Now for our white GPU, that thing's pretty gorgeous. Now the backplate is also white. The PCB isn't, it's the standard silver. Your connectors are still black, but I think for all intensive purposes, it's gonna look really nice today and suit the aesthetic of the build really well. I'm gonna hover it over the very top PCI slot, that's this one here, and that shows me it's the top 2 covers that need to be removed. So I'm gonna go ahead and just unscrew cover number 2, as well as cover number 1, before sliding the RTX 5070 with its plastic GPU cover removed and the PCI slot unlocked into place. Are we good to go? I think we are. Yes, look at that. Now those screws I just removed are actually going to go back into place. That's going to hold the card nice and firm. You can hold the GPU up as well while you screw it in. That'll just help to make sure you minimize things like GPU sag. And with that in, we should be down to the final component. And I am of course talking about the power supply. Now I've picked this is the Corsair RM750E in white. Now Corsair have done a really good job of refreshing some of their power supply lineups, and this 750 watt unit is no exception. You could drop down to 650 if you wanted to save some cash in this build, but I'd recommend the higher 750 wattage to give you a little bit of future upgrade and wiggle room while also not breaking the bank. I'm gonna go ahead and screw this into the bottom of the case with the fan facing down to pull in air from underneath, and then wire up the CPU, motherboard, and GPU before rejoining you to see how good this system looks when it's all powered on. I absolutely love how good this system looks when it's all powered up. There's something about the XT-View in white and this specific 5070 model that just go really well together. But what about performance? Well, on your screen now, as always, is a compilation of all the different games we tested. They're all at 1440p high settings, rasterization, so no DLSS and no ray tracing, with the exception of Fortnite, which was tested at 1080p competitive settings. Taking a closer look into one or two titles, Black Ops 6 Zombies, obviously super popular at the moment. This clocks in at just under 120 frames per second at 1440p high. Marvel's Rivals at 1440p high also maintains a triple-digit frame rate with 103.6 FPS on average, while tuning down to 1080p competitive settings in Fortnite is going to yield you over 250 frames per second. Now, of course, if you wanted super competitive gameplay at 1080p and were willing to sacrifice the resolution in this build, you'd be able to push all these frame rates a good chunk higher. But for me, this is a system designed for 1440p gaming across the latest AAA titles. You can find links to all the parts mentioned today in the description below for latest pricing and availability. You can find a link to this PC pre-built from our UK viewers on geekapc.com. And of course, make sure to get subscribed to see more from us. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.